This lesson is Advanced Page Layout. In this lesson, you will learn to create a fixed width 2-column layout with a header and footer using CSS. Specifically, you will learn about the float and clear properties and using them to create columns. Before we get started, you will want to define a Dreamweaver site pointing at the DW06 lessons folder. Once that is done, you will open the layout HTML file and see the page as it is seen here. So this page already has some structure to it. If you click to the right of the Organic Utopia logo in the header section and go down to the tag selector in the lower left corner, we can see that we have a div with the ID of container and a header element with the ID header. If I click on container in the tag selector, I can then look in CSS Designer. First, let me close my files pane. Clicking on style and container under the selectors and making sure the show set checkbox is set. The width of my container is listed at 960 pixels, the height 850 pixels, and the left and right margins are set to auto. This will create a fixed width centered container for our content on the page. We will begin by adding some new elements to our document, including a navigation bar, left and right columns, and a footer. In previous versions of Dreamweaver, prior to full HTML5 support, we might have added these as div elements. Dreamweaver CC adds the new HTML5 elements, including header, navigation, aside, section, and footer. So we will take advantage of these to create a properly formed document. Making sure we're in the structure category of the insert panel, choose navigation from the insert panel to display the insert navigation dialog box. We have a few options for how to insert our element. Clicking the down arrow, we can choose at insertion point, before tag, after start of tag, before end of tag, and after tag. We want the navigation bar to appear after the heading, so we'll choose after tag. From the adjacent dropdown, we'll specify header, and in the ID, we'll label our nav element with the ID navigation. We'll then click OK, and Dreamweaver will insert our navigation element, or our nav element with the ID navigation, right beneath the header where we wanted it. Next, we can use CSS to style our header. Double-click the Insert tab to collapse it, giving us room to work with the CSS Designer. Choose Style from the sources, so that we can add the style to our embedded style sheet. And choose Add Selector, or the plus sign, from the Selectors menu. Dreamweaver will propose a selector name called Container Navigation. This is a little too specific, so we'll simplify that so that it's simply Navigation, leaving the pound sign, and press Enter or Return. If necessary, clear the Show Set checkbox and choose the background properties from the Properties navigation bar. And we'll set the background color to pound 88 B036. Press Enter or Return. Next, we'll click the Layout button and set the width in percentages to 100%. This will ensure our nav bar spans the width of our container. Next, we'll set the height, choosing pixel, and specifying 36 pixels for our height. Again, pressing Enter or Return. And we have now allocated space for our nav bar that's 36 pixels tall and 100% wide. We'll now add the 3 elements for the main content area, the sidebar area, and the footer. Click the Insert tab to bring up the Insert panel, and choose Section for our main content section. In the Insert Section dialog box, let's again choose After tag, this time choosing nav ID equals navigation in the adjacent box. And we'll give this section the ID main. Clicking OK, Dreamweaver will insert our section element with the ID main along with some placeholder text. Before we style our main section, let's add our second column. We could use a section element for this again, but we will use an aside, as this will function as a sidebar. In the Insert Aside dialog box, we will again choose After tag, and from the adjacent menu, choose Section ID equals main. We will give our aside the ID sidebar. Click OK, and Dreamweaver will insert our sidebar placeholder. Finally, let's add our footer content area. We will do this using the HTML5 footer element. Click Footer from the Insert panel. Choose After Tag, Sidebar, and we'll give this the ID Footer. Click OK. We now have 3 additional content areas: main, sidebar, and footer. Next, we can specify the widths of our columns. But before we do that, let's add a background color to footer so we can observe its behavior as we create our column widths. Double-click Insert to close the Insert panel, and choose Style from our CSS Designer panel. Click Add Selector, and let's again simplify the rule so that it's just footer with the pound sign. We're using the pound sign because we gave this element an ID as opposed to a class name. With pound footer as my selector name, I can press Enter or Return and choose the background color. And we'll set the background color to pound CCC. Again, pressing Enter or Return. Now our footer has a light gray background color, which will help us see what happens as we apply the float properties to our main and sidebar elements. Next, we'll specify a height and width for our main content element. Click within the main content area and then choose Section Main from the tag selector. We do this to ensure that we have the main element selected when we create our style rule. Choose Style from CSS Designer and click the Add Selector button. Again, we'll simplify this so that it simply reads main. Pressing Enter or Return. We'll choose the Layout button, select Pixels, and set the width to 600. Pressing Enter or Return. Scroll down to the Float property and choose Right. The main content area will move to the right margin, and the sidebar will move up to fill the space next to it. Now we'll add some content to see how it fits in the column. From the Files panel, double-click on Main Content HTML. Place your cursor inside the file and press Ctrl-A or Command-A to select all, Ctrl-C or Command-V to copy. Click back over to Layout HTML, highlight the placeholder text in Main, and press Ctrl-V or Command-V to insert the text. Notice that the footer now appears behind the main column. This is a result of the floated properties we just added. We'll take a look at this shortly, but first, we'll style the sidebar. Click inside the sidebar, and then choose Aside Sidebar from the tag selector. Choose Style from Sources, and click Add Selector. Again, let's simplify this so it just reads Sidebar. Press Enter. Then we'll choose the Layout button, then double-click Auto in Width, and set the width to 360 pixels. And press Enter or Return. Scroll down to the Float property and choose Float Left. You'll see that our sidebar hasn't changed, but our footer now takes the space right under the navigation bar. Again, we'll fix this in a minute. For now, let's add some content to our sidebar. In the Files panel, double-click on Sidebar Content HTML. From the Edit menu, we can choose Select All, Edit, Copy, go back to our Layout HTML file, select our placeholder text, and choose Edit, Paste. The sidebar expands to fit the content, which is a definition list. However, our footer still appears behind both the sidebar and the main. The reason for this has to do with the nature of floated elements. Floated elements are removed from the default flow of HTML, and since both columns are floated, the footer ignores them and moves up directly below the navigation section. This is also why the height of the footer has expanded. From the perspective of the footer, there are no columns to interact with, so it assumes its default behavior. In order to push the footer below the columns, we need to add another CSS property to the footer called Clear. In the CSS Designer, let's choose Style and locate our footer. Let's make the Files panel smaller so I can see what I'm doing. Footer. And from the Layout properties, we will choose Clear. And since we've set the float of left and right, let's set clear to both. Our footer now displays properly at the bottom of the document. Had we just cleared the float right property, the footer may have appeared to behave. This is because the right floated column, the main column, is longer than the left side. If we select and delete that content, our footer misbehaves again. Let's undo the deletion. Had we simply set clear to left, our footer again tucks itself up underneath the left sidebar, so that our footer behaves appropriately. The reason this works now is because clearing both the float left and float right ensures that there are no left floated elements or right floated elements that appear after the footer. We're in pretty good shape here, and we have a good foundation for our page. Let's save our work. File, save. And let's take a look at it in the browser, clicking Preview in iExplorer. Here we see our two-column layout with our header and footer. So that's it for now. In this lesson, you learned a little bit about the float and clear properties and used them to create a two-column layout with a header and footer. This lesson was Advanced Page Layout.